Hello, Bobby Jones here, sitting in for Ken Harbaugh this week on Midas Touch and Valor Media Networks. And like you, the world is talking about what's been going on with Iran and Israel and the capability of Iran to produce a nuclear weapon. Well, I don't believe in hearsay. I don't believe in sources. I want to go and find subject matter experts. And so we are very, very honored today to have Miss Sharon Riggle, who will explain to you what is actually going on in factual terms. Why? Because she's been there and done that. So, Sharon, can you give us a little bit about your background before we get into the actual events?
Sure, of course. Well, I've been involved in nuclear nonproliferation and disarmament issues since 1995, and have been involved in negotiating with member states like Iran and all the members of the Nuclear Nonproliferation Treaty, and have helped develop papers for those environments. And I was also the regional head for disarmament for the United Nations for all of Asia and Pacific for Greece recently. So this is an issue I've been following for quite a long time.
Wow. So, 3 decades in the actual, not just international space, but also in the technical expertise space of weapons proliferation. So, you are better than anybody I know to talk about what are we seeing in Iran? What are we seeing in the Middle East? And should people be concerned based on what they're hearing from various parties, to include the United States?
Well, I think there's always reason for concern when we're talking about nuclear weapons. This is something that since the 1940s, the world has been afraid is going to happen again. And in 1970, they developed the Nuclear Nonproliferation Treaty. The nuclear weapon states did, especially so we wouldn't have this problem again. So there are three countries that never signed up, Israel being one of them, interestingly, and India and Pakistan. It is suspected more countries probably have technology and fissile material now than before. So we have threats since the 1950s, 1960s. So not a lot has changed other than the threshold for action against suspected nuclear weapon states. And in terms of danger, and I think this is part of the article that I wrote that we were discussing earlier, is one, it is being hyped in the media in a way that is not useful and not even correct in terms of threats to the American homeland. Even my governor, who's an excellent governor, was issuing "Don't worry, I've got your back" kind of messages, which is appreciated, but it also scaremongers in the media as well. I think there's a lack of understanding. So Iran being a problem in this arena is nothing new. In 1995, we were talking about it, and they talk about it every 5 years at the review conferences of the NPT. Their capacity has evolved over the years. So definitely now versus 1970s, there's more of an issue. However, they have not moved to create a weapon. They have not weaponized anything. The amount of technology and expertise and access to materials, including dual use materials, fissilable material, all of these things, they have bits and pieces of it. And so there's a worry that if they wanted to, they could move in that direction. But contrary to what the administration is saying, there's absolutely no evidence that they have created a nuclear warhead. So a nuclear warhead is the tip of it that creates the mushroom cloud, et cetera. But there's a lot of other things that have to go into that as well. In addition, you need a delivery system. And a delivery system is usually a missile. And there's different types of that, and you certainly would be better placed to explain that than I would. But you need something to put it on if you're going to threaten people. And if we look at what, and in the article too, there's a lot of references. You can check yourself. The farthest that they ever developed their missiles was medium range, according to what the international community considers medium range, and it goes about 1,250 miles, which is Eastern Europe kind of thing. So there's no intercontinental ballistic missile. Maybe in by 2035, I think was one estimate that if they really wanted to develop that, they could. So we don't have anything, first and foremost for Americans, we don't have anything really to worry about on the ground here in America. There's no way that any nuclear weapons can get to us. And in addition, we should also compare, and I'm all for nonproliferation and disarmament. I dedicated a lot of my career to this. And we also be looking at, and what's not being covered in the news, that Israel has about at least 100 nuclear weapons. That is been known. They developed it in the 1960s. It's their hedge against being in an unwelcome neighborhood. And if we look at what Iran might possibly produce with their 400 or so kilograms of highly enriched uranium, which is not even enriched all the way to where it needs to be, we're looking at 10 to 12, right? One is too much, clearly. One is too much. We need to get rid of these. I'm a pro nuclear disarmament person. I've worked with governments, including not with the United States government, but I have been pushing nuclear weapon states for disarmament, which is the ultimate goal of the Nuclear Nonproliferation Treaty. That was, and one last piece on that, that was the deal. In 1970, we're going to sign a nuclear nonproliferation treaty. The 5 countries that already have nuclear weapons, China, Russia, France, UK, and the US, with, of course, well, at the time, USSR and America, had giant arsenals, and the other 3 had small arsenals. But anyways, we'll get rid of our weapons, and the rest of you can use nuclear materials for energy, peaceful uses of nuclear energy. So that's how Iran has been operating.
Let me ask you a follow-up then. Based on what you said about the requirements needed to create a nuclear weapon, President Trump just said at NATO in The Hague that, they didn't move the material. That's why we know we got it, etc., making some pretty bold claims like they couldn't move it. It's too dangerous to move. Is it feasible to believe that Iran moved the material before those strikes occurred and they could still maybe have setbacks, but still have a viable nuclear program?
Okay, I think those are 2 things. Viable nuclear
Yes.
program, and did they move the materials? I absolutely
Yes.
believe they moved most of the materials. Did they get it all? I don't know. They have the know-how. Something that Israel did do to lay the groundwork for all of this, when we start talking about the politics of this moment in time and why now, Israel has preemptively been working deep inside Iran to get rid of, and I'm guessing, assassinations of nuclear scientists, getting rid of some of their infrastructure, disabling as much as they could to make this kind of action that we've seen recently safer and more possible. In terms of a viable nuclear program, I mean, it looks as if we have seen the destruction of a lot of infrastructure. And that was with the Israeli bombings, even before the US came in with its, bunker buster or whatever. I absolutely believe the DIA that just came out with a report that says it's probably, they collapsed the entrances and, some of the infrastructure is down. I absolutely believe that. I believe Israel when they say that their missile technology and their missile capability has been damaged for, months, years, whatever. I do believe that. These are all known quantities, though. Let me express that. The international community has been been worried about Iran and similar countries for years. There's something called the Missile Technology Control Regime, and the dual use. There's anything where you could buy, make a nuclear weapon or a delivery system. There's a group of developed nations really monitoring all the bits and pieces, kind of like the way here, if we're homegrown terrorists or something, who's bought ammonia, who's bought this, who's bought that. There's that internationally. So it's pretty clear who has what. So there were really no surprises. Netanyahu back in the 90s was also saying they're minutes away from building the bomb. And that was 30 years ago. So we can't listen to the rhetoric, but we can look as a military man, look at capability versus intent. And the capability could be there. It's really been set back. I absolutely believe it. But that's why we need a politically negotiated solution, because we need to also get the intent to match the capability.
I think you hit on a very key point there, the political solution, because if I'm hearing you right, you're saying, hey, that capability has not been destroyed, it's been delayed. And very key point here, there was no new intelligence or something that was just earth shattering that led people to believe we had to act now because y'all are tracking these things. The world is tracking these things. Is that safe to assume?
Yes, I mean, I can't say definitively because I don't have
Right.
access to the high level documents, but there's no surprises. I mean, that's why I think I was surprised when I saw the world's reaction. And one of the reasons I wrote this article, because I thought, whoa, 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 everybody just calm down. We don't have a lot that's new. They haven't ratcheted up. The rhetoric is always they're on the verge of. But if we look at historically how Iran and North Korea, for that matter, have used their nuclear threat is for leverage, is for brinksmanship, is for attention, is for don't mess with me or I could do you don't even know what kind of thing. And to them, that's actually a much more useful strategic military tool, if I can say it that way, um, than actually trying to bomb anybody, because think of what that would mean. I mean, just take a step back as, the average person with logic. If you're little around, and they're not that little, okay, but if you've got a tiny arsenal and you are surrounded by an entire world who says, stop it, are you really going to launch a preemptive strike on Israel, given that, the US and Israel have been militarily cooperating forever and ever and still do? They have some of the most sophisticated stuff in the world. Are you really going to do that? Are you going to bomb, anybody else that you don't like? The answer is no. You have to. Then what happens the day after, right? So I think it's more useful as a threat.
And so my final question, and this is, I can't thank you enough for bringing some clarity to a situation that has been, in my humble opinion, purposely muddied. Um, the agreement that President Obama reached with Iran, the JCPOA, that was the political solution. Are we now at a point where we're struggling to basically get back to that after all this military action? I mean, it seemed like this may have been pointless based on what you're saying.
Well, yes. I mean, that is it. I
Wow.
mean, we saw that. Let me, if I can just walk us through, the last 8 years in 30 seconds. But if I can walk us through, we all saw Trump come into office during his first term and rip up anything that had Obama's fingerprint on it, right? The one thing that Obama, if we remember, that he said to Trump when he left is, please keep the JCPOA with Iran. It was hard won. It's the best thing. It's good for everybody. Makes everybody look good. Nope. First thing he did, climate accord, JCPOA, anything that Obama championed. So what that did is remove the uh, really intrusive inspections from Iran, where everything coming in out, everything that could have possibly be attached to the program was inspected. And there were people there coming and going. So we had that, and in exchange they got, and this is what we're talking about now. In exchange, they got their accounts unfrozen. They got some money.
Sanctions lifted.
Yeah, sanctions lifted because they're in the Security Council sanctions regime, and of course got their reputation burnished a little bit. So okay, so that happened. Then Trump comes in the second time, and of course the JCPOA was internationally, and I think this is the piece of it too that I take issue with. It looks like this is some trilateral experience, right, between Israel, the U.S., and Iran. Absolutely not. You cannot have nuclear weapons be a trilateral experience. So it is an internationally negotiated, hard-won agreement, the JCPOA. And with the U.S. pulling out, it didn't have the teeth that it needed. So now they're talking about doing this again. They're going to call it something different. They're going to save face, whatever. So the moment in time, and this is what I wanted to really make a point of, because it's going to help, I think, people filter out some of the noise that we're hearing about this, which is we're at a certain moment in time. We have a president that is capricious, is completely self-absorbed and really worried about winning and reputation over any other problems that he might make. So, and I think the crux of this can be summed up in one phrase that he said recently: I haven't decided yet. Well,
Bingo.
domestically and internationally, that is the biggest problem we have. It should never, ever, ever. And even though I'm a big Obama supporter, I wouldn't want him to say that either. You need consultation. Congress is the only one that can make war. His breach of law is problem. And what we're not talking about either is breach of international law. We haven't talked about international law. You cannot go and preemptively strike a sovereign nation unless your very survival is at stake. And certainly a one and done demonstrates to us that it is not an existential threat to the United States or even Israel. So we have Netanyahu has really seized this moment. He's very clever. He's been working on this as long as I have. And he is very clever and he saw his moment. He's got, he knows how to talk to Trump. He knows how to, stroke his ego. He knows how to say, hey, we're going to go do this. We've already laid the groundwork. Just come in and help us, because he knows no other country in the world would. And certainly no other U.S. president would. Other presidents have, taken the diplomatic route because it's infinitely safer. And so he sees this moment, and Trump needs some wins at helm. He has had a series of failures recently, losing face, et cetera. Poll numbers, the lowest in history. So he needs a little bit of a distraction. And I'm not saying the whole thing was a distraction, because that would be really oversimplifying. But Netanyahu, basically, this is my take. Netanyahu saw this fellow who's easily manipulable, is willing to act unilaterally, doesn't really care about the law. And as long as you give him a little win and victory dance at the end, he's willing to do a lot of what you want. And that is why I think Trump is responding the way he is, getting so mad and swearing on camera, is because he probably negotiated with Netanyahu a one and done. We're going to go out, we're going to bomb. And then you saw his messages right afterwards as, hey, it's all over. Yay, ceasefire, good luck. And then they didn't honor the ceasefire like everybody thought. And then he's really mad because I'm sure he was promised.
Embarrassed.
Yeah.
International.
And betrayed. I think, he knows that he's manipulable. And so Netanyahu, I'm sure, spent, a lot of time doing this. And then he's like, oh, yeah, just like with Putin. You saw when Putin didn't do what he wanted to do in Ukraine, suddenly he lashes out at him. Very in keeping with his personality.
Sharon, I cannot thank you enough for bringing some clarity. In the description, you will see a link not only to her page, but to the article that I recommend everybody listening to this read. I mean, it's phenomenal. It breaks it down where you understand what the heck is going on, and we get rid of all the propaganda around the actual case of nuclear weapon proliferation in the world, but specifically in the Middle East. Sharon, I look forward to having you on again sometime in the future, because there's a ton of questions I'm sure we'll have, but I cannot thank you enough for coming on today.
Well, I thank you too, Bobby. And if you would allow, can I give one point? Because I'm a former UN staffer who left the UN because I wasn't happy with the way my country was going. So I am now an activist, and I would like to point out to, 3 messages. One, to citizens. Don't lose sight of what's going on in our country. We have a deadly budget that wants to be passed. A tax on immigrants. Our democratic infrastructure is crumbling in a very intentional way. Breaches of rule of law. This is the mission. This is the emergency. This is the danger. So contact your representatives. Contact the media. And to the media and the representatives, I say, stop scaremongering. Focus on what is actually, the actual capabilities, the actual reality, and don't put out, oh, we're guarding our infrastructure, et cetera. The worst we're going to see probably, and, I hope I'm right, are cyber attacks, or they're going to close the Strait of Hormuz or something. So I just want everybody to know you are empowered. Contact your representative.
Perfect ending note. You heard her, ladies and gentlemen. Get to work. Thank you.
Thank you, Bobby.
New Midas merch drop. Check out the latest pro-democracy sticker packs, t-shirts, hats, sweatshirts, and more, all at store.MidasTouch.com.